This is the final of our series of webinars for this academic year, and it's a good one. We've got Discover Your Strengths today. We have the wonderful James, who is the owner of Interscope. James, would you like to say a quick welcome to everybody?
Good morning. All well done for logging up and getting signed in for today's webinar. Really excited to be spending time with you this morning and helping you discover your strengths.
Great. And we also have Tarek. Tarek, would you like to say a quick hello as well?
Good morning, everybody. Very warm welcome to everyone. My name is Tarek. I'm a lead partnership officer within the Outreach and Access team, and I'm going to be your moderator today.
Okay, wonderful. And I am Sophia. I'm the Pre-16 Partnerships Manager at the University of East London. So I'm just going to give you a little introduction to the University of East London. Apologies to those of you who have heard this before. We do kind of do a little intro at every one of these webinars, just so you know a little bit about our institution as well. So the University of East London was established in 1898, so it's quite a long-running institution. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner there the oldest part of the university, which is in Stratford. We actually have 3 campuses. So the top picture is our main campus, and that is in Docklands. It's actually really easy to get to. You just jump on a DLR and get off at Cyprus Station and literally walk onto campus. It's that easy. And then we also have a second and third campus, as I say, in Stratford. One of the buildings is the University Square, Stratford, which we share with another institution. And they're all really easy to get to, all based in, of course, East London. So we have students from over 135 different countries. We also have a really high contingent of students from the East London area and around London as well, of which James used to be one of them. So I'm really pleased to have him here today as an alum of UEL. So really pleased. So I'm just going to move on and hand over to James so that he can do his thing and tell you all about how to discover your strengths.
All right, thank you very much, Sophia. So a key aim for today's webinar, key aim is to help students identify their strengths in order to enhance their personal development. That's a key aspect of today. And one of our objectives for today is to help students with confidence and resilience so that they can negotiate the challenge of university life and graduate progression. And as we do so, when we were preparing for this webinar, I remember a time when I was a youth worker. Before having the privilege of running Interscope, I was a youth worker, and I had the even added privilege. I was able to be a youth worker in the area where I grew up. It was in North London, in Islington. I lived around the corner from the Emirates Stadium, so I would hear when Arsenal would lose. And oftentimes what would happen is that we would do detached youth work sessions. And I remember a particular evening, me and one of my colleagues, we walked out onto the estate. As we were out on the estate, we were doing what we would usually do. We took the usual routes. We spoke to young people in the area. But one of my colleagues noticed that there was a gentleman that was sleeping on the floor. It was a homeless man. So we went over to him. The thing is, this wasn't a rarity to us. We were used to seeing people sleeping rough within the area. But what was actually quite different this time is where he chose to sleep. In fact, where he was sleeping, it indicated to us that he wasn't really familiar with the area. And in fact, it was quite dangerous. So as I walked up, we were walking, and I noticed that he was sleeping on this plastic sheet type thing. Anyway, he was asleep. My colleagues kind of starts to engage him in conversation. And as he wakes up in a panic and in a fluster, and he's saying, a bag, I really need a massive bag. See, the thing is, he's had belongings with him, and he had quite a few. So he wanted a massive bag so he can fit all of his belongings in this bag. So we were there trying to work out if there's any way we can do anything to support him. So anyway, he gets to his feet, and as he gets to his feet, we're handing him over some of these possessions. So I go to that plastic sheet that was on the floor that he was sleeping on, and I pick it up, only to realize that this plastic sheet was actually a plastic bag. It was a massive plastic bag, and it became a laughing point for us all. But the irony was that he was literally looking for something that he actually had access to. He was literally sleeping on that very thing that he needed. And I think this powerfully illustrates the reality of our strengths. Oftentimes, our strengths are right underneath our nose. In my friend's case, hit the bag, he was literally sleeping on it. So here we have it. I wonder what you are sleeping on. To each and every one of you that has logged into this webinar, I wonder what skills, what qualities, what strengths, even experiences you have that maybe you take for granted. And today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to actually pause and we're going to spend some time actually exploring that, because we know that once you're aware of your strengths, you can maximize your strengths. But before we go any further, I really would love to hear from you. You've signed up to this webinar, and it's about your strengths. But my initial question is about this. Why are they important? Why are strengths important? Excellent. So yeah, it'll be great if you can give that some thought. Sophia, any thoughts in regards to this aspect thus far?
At my point in life, like realizing that if you work to your strengths, you can enjoy things more. Actually, you know, you can enjoy what you do for a living much more. And you know, there's always things that you will always have to go through or do that, you know, you just have to do it. That's life. That is life.
Yeah.
That's the reality of matters at the end of the day. But if you can get to the position where you are working to your strengths and what you enjoy, I think that's wonderful. A really, really wonderful. And if you can work towards that, that's no bad thing.
Most definitely. Most definitely. Yeah.
So Tarek, is there anyone in the chat box at this point?
Yeah, we've had a couple of responses. Someone said strengths are important because they help identify what you are good at, and they can help in thinking about future jobs. And we've had someone else who has said that strengths are important because they can help you identify what your weaknesses are, which is a very good point. And someone else has just put in now, to help you on your journey to success and to guide you on decisions, or to know what to improve.
That's really good. That is excellent. I love these responses. Thank you all so much. And listen, as Sophia said, this is your webinar, so we want to continue to hear your insightful responses. So listen, the next piece of information, usually we take to head teachers or middle leaders in schools, but we thought the sort of young people that would want to discover their strengths, they should definitely get insight into this as well. So here is one key reason why it's important to know your strengths, and it's kind of come out in your answer. There's an interesting principle called the 70-30 principle. And if you look to the left of the slide, you will see it says 70%, and underneath that it says natural strengths. It says your unconscious competence. That means the things that you're so good at, you don't even acknowledge it. It's almost like you don't even realize how good you are at it. That's what you call your unconscious competence. And when you use your natural strengths, as you can see at the bottom, with the American spelling there, it says it's energizing. And this is why it's so helpful to know what your strengths are, because what you'll find is that in work, what this principle says is that if you find a job where you get to use your natural strengths 70% of the time, it doesn't need to be 100%, 70% of the time, the chances are you're going to absolutely love that particular career, that particular field of work. And it does something else. If you get to use your strengths 70% of the time, it actually gives you momentum for the 30%. So now I need you to look at the right side of the slide. It gives you momentum for the 30% that doesn't come naturally to you, the 30% that you might not enjoy as much. So that's what we will call your learned behavior or your conscious competence. And that 30% you might find a little bit draining, but if you've got that 70% going, then you're able to manage your role fairly well. Now, why it's really important to know what your strengths are is because let's just say you go into a job where instead of it being 70-30, it looks more like 50-50 with your strengths and those aspects of the role that don't come naturally to you. What the research suggests is that you're more likely to struggle. So this is a really key thing that you're on this webinar, and have this in mind moving forward. What sort of opportunities or job roles can I put myself in where I'm able to use my strengths a lot of the time? That's a key thing to bear in mind. So quite practically for me, I know my strengths are around working with people, collaboration and communication. And what will be in my 30 for me is like administration and emails and doing spreadsheets. That's when I start to wither away and start to snore during work. But I know that if I'm able to use my strengths 70% of the time, as I said, it gives me momentum to do my admin and to do my spreadsheets and all of that good stuff there. So that's the first thing we're going to look at today, the 70-30 principle. Do keep that in mind. But here's another one. Another key reason why it's great to know your strengths is because your strengths strengthens teams. I'm not sure if anyone here is familiar with this movie, The Incredibles. I used to love this movie growing up. And for anyone that might not be familiar with The Incredibles, it's about this family. They're all superheroes, but during the day, they've got to pretend like they're normal civilians, but during the night, they're fighting crime and saving the world. And what I love about this family is that they all have different strengths. All of them contributed to the team, contributed to the task in very unique, specific, but yet equally powerful ways. And the same thing happens when we know what our strengths are and then we take that to a team. What happens is that whatever team you become a part of, whether that's work experience, whether that's work, whether that's an apprenticeship, once you're aware of your strengths, that team gets to benefit from your strengths, and we just think that's amazing. So those are two key things. The first thing is the 70-30 principle. That's really helpful to help you know why to harness your strengths. But the second thing here is that your strengths strengthens teams. So now we're starting to edge towards the question about, okay, so how do we work out our strengths? And I came across this really, really helpful model here. I really need you to pay attention. So as you can see, this is called the Johari Window. I know it sounds fancy, but it's not that fancy. It was made up by one guy called Joe, another guy called Harry. They put their names together, so it came up with the name Johari Window. And as you can see, we've got what's called the open self. That's in the top left. And your open self is information about you that both you and others know. So there's strengths that you have that you know they're a strength to you and others know that they're a strength to you. And we want to encourage you to be really crystal clear on those strengths and think about how you can develop them. We're going to be talking about that later. But if we go to the top right, we can see that there's what we call the blind self. And that's information about you that you don't know, but others do know. And what this does, this introduces us to a very important notion. It's this whole idea that other people can help you discover your strengths. Sometimes there's things that you're good at, as we said before, you might not even recognize it. So your friends and your peers and your teachers can actually help point out what your strengths are. That's the blind self. And then we've got what's called the hidden self. And that's when you're aware of your strengths, but maybe you haven't made others aware of your strengths. And then and again, that's up to you as to how you want to go about, I guess, revealing or making use of your strengths. But finally, one that I find really fascinating is the last one at the bottom right. It's called the unknown self. This is information about you that neither you know or others know. And I find that to be an exciting space. But a simple question is, okay, if I'm not aware of my strengths, James, and there's some strengths that others are not aware of, how do we unearth them? And I would say this, a powerful way to unearth your unknown strengths is doing what you've done today, putting yourself in spaces and environments and opportunities that you're not used to, stepping outside of your comfort zone and doing things you wouldn't usually do, and you'll be surprised what you learn. I remember when I was about 15, I was a bit of an MC. I was a part of a music group. I used to go to a local youth club, and a youth worker there said, James, we're going to be running we're doing a talent show, and I'm putting your name down. He didn't even ask me. He said, I'm putting your name down. You're going to do it. I think he had seen me do a little bit of MC now and again, and he thought, you know what? Although I haven't seen this guy on stage, I'm just going to put his name down. So I went along with it. I tried to back out at one stage, but I eventually rose to it. And I was literally petrified. I remember I'm seeing a swarm of people. I had to go on the stage and do some of my songs. I spent most of my time on that stage looking at the ground, nervous and scared. But over some time, I kind of warmed up to it. And guess what? I actually started to enjoy it when initially I was petrified. Turns out that I won 25 pounds and we won the competition. But that particular instance showed me that actually there was a strength there. What I learned from that is I'm quite good at engaging people with communication. And that particular experience, I would say, has been so significant for me, even to this day as an adult. Before I go on to, speak to other teachers or speak to students, that one experience started a journey for me that has contributed to Interscope today. So I'm going to hand over to Sophia. She's got some really provocative questions that are going to get you thinking about your strengths.
Okay, guys, so yeah, I'm going to pose a few questions to you because this is a workshop and we want your input and we want you to discover your strengths and also your weaknesses, which we'll get on to a little bit later. But the first question that I'd like to pose to you are, what activities are you naturally good at? And, I've run lots of workshops for young people, and occasionally I hear the odd person whisper to the person next to them who happens to be their mate and goes, I don't know what my strengths are. I don't know. What is it that I'm good at? And sometimes it takes actually asking another person, what are you naturally good at? Because it's not necessarily obvious, particularly if you're at a young age and you haven't had that many experiences, or you perceive that you haven't had that many experiences, but you actually all have. You may have grown up in, say, different circumstances. You may have had to move school. You may have had to deal with a new sibling when you're a teenager and you're studying. There may be a number of different scenarios that you would have lived through that has meant that you've discovered what you need and what your strengths are actually. So I want you to think about the different scenarios that you found yourselves in and worked out, like, well, what are you naturally good at? So Tarek, is there anything in the Q&A box at this point?
Okay, they're coming through now. So we've had someone who said, I'm naturally good at baking and cooking.
Wow.
Great.
We've had another response that said they are a very good team worker. Someone else who said that they're good at delivering presentations. And someone else who said that they are a good problem solver.
Wow.
We've also had someone who's just put that they are good at sports and leadership roles.
Very good. That's actually, you know what? I'm quite impressed with that. I don't know about you, James. I think that's pretty good identification of strengths.
Definitely. I'm very, very impressed. It's really excellent. It's good. Keep it up.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question I'm going to pose is, if people ask you for help, what is it usually related to? Okay, so I'm going to give you like a personal example. When I was at school, well, two things actually. When I was at school, at the end of the year, you get what we had were journals, so our diaries that we had to like keep all of our notes in, and we used to go around and get them all signed by everyone else. And I used to kind of flick through and just like, well, what have people actually said about me? Obviously, you have a look through and see. And a lot of the time, the messages were, Sophia, you're so helpful, you're so helpful, you're so helpful. I was like, what do I do with this helpfulness? What do I do with this helpfulness, So it is, people tend to just turn around to me and say, what do I do in this situation? And I'll go, okay, you need to do X, Y, Z, and then go and speak to that person. Or in my friendship group, they're like, we want to go do this, Sophia. Sophia, can you go sort it out? Because they see me for some reason as the organizer, as the person who's going to get the ducks in the row and to kind of drive things forward, because things just don't happen unless someone actually steps up and does something. So I tend to find that. For myself. But for you guys, if people ask you for help, what is it usually in relation to? Tarek, is there anything on the chat?
Yeah, we've got a response who said, I'm good at listening to others, which is a really, really good skill to have. We've had someone else who said that when they're in a team, they're really good at coordinating and keeping on track with a task, which again is a really, really fantastic point. And someone else who has said, if I'm asked for help, what it usually relates to is problem solving.
Yeah. Good. Wonderful. Really, really good. And you know what? The fact is that people have picked up on your strengths without you having to say anything. They look around and they say, right, that person does this really well. Let's go speak to them. So that's really great. Thank you, guys. And the last question I'm going to pose is, what type of job would you like to do in the future and why? Good. Okay, and I think this is so important. It's so important to link back to your strengths. Because actually, ideally, you want to be in the place where you are using your strengths, as James says. You want to achieve that 70-30 it would be wonderful if we could get it 100%, but that's not the reality of life. But you want to be in a position where you are comfortable with what you're doing and it truly links to what you're good at and what you're strong at and what you enjoy. So I want you to think really carefully about what you want in the future. And I'm very conscious that there's lots of different voices that come into play in your families, what they want for you, what your friends will be doing, how much you know what's out there and what you can do, because again, you need to take those steps to actually investigate what is right for you, but a good place to start is your strengths. This is why I was so keen to do this webinar with James. So again, Tarek, is there anything in the chat at the moment?
Yeah, we've had a response who says, I want to pursue criminology because I feel like a detective when listening to global crimes. Somebody who said something in sports. And then we've had a response from somebody who said artist, because this is how I express my internal world and ideas.
That's really great. I think I need to do a bit more art. I think that would help me a lot, to be honest. But that's really great. I'm glad that you've got ideas. And those of you who you're not sure, that's okay. There's people in their 30s who aren't sure. So I think what you can do is start the steps now, start investigating now, and make the most of the opportunities that you have, as James has stated.
Well, I must say, really, really impressed by the self-awareness that you are displaying, and that's great because it serves as a basis that you can only from now on go on to build up on. When we work with students nationwide, this is a questions that we take to them in terms of their strength. And one thing I would say, if you're logged in and you're like, do you know what? If I was to be honest, I'm not entirely sure. That's absolutely fine. Again, that's why you're here. And there's going to be a variety of input that would help you discover that somewhat. And I guess this is one of them, really. So we have what's called the Strength Bank. And as you can see to the left, it's got qualities, a variety of qualities like enthusiasm, trustworthiness, creativity, and so on and so on. And to the right, it's got skills and abilities. And what's really cool is that some of these qualities and skills and abilities, some of you have already mentioned, which is great. But again, this is another opportunity for you to just take some time, go through the list and simply think about what particular qualities, skills and abilities, what resonates with you. And again, can you think of a time when you actually made use of it? Can you evidence the time when you've seen some of these skills and qualities displayed? Yeah, I'm not sure if you've got any thoughts you want to throw in, Sophia, in regards to the Strength Bank list.
Yeah, I mean, this is a really great thing to have, I think, just because it just gets you thinking about, well, you know, what are my personal qualities, what naturally comes to me very easily, and what are also the skills and abilities which you learn. This is the thing, skills are learnt, and you have to bear that in mind, that you can get better at, say, doing presentations or being organized or communicating. There's training out there that you can do and that will improve, but it's about taking those opportunities as well. And I think the important thing is that sometimes if you're not sure what your strengths are, do ask, do go and speak to people who know you well. So again, on my school reports, I'm going to use myself as an example just because it's me, but I always got, oh, Sophia's very conscientious, Sophia's very diligent. That was like, those words always came up every single year, every single report. But also my handwriting is incredibly poor, partly because I write so fast. Like, I'm always trying to get things down as soon as possible, and it is atrocious. There are 6-year-olds with better handwriting than me. I struggle to read my handwriting sometimes, but you know, those are things that are consistent, and those are things that I pulled off from my school reports that my teachers told me. But equally, you can speak to your friends, people who know you well, your teachers, as I say, your parents. So you know, Tarek and I have worked with each other for a few years now, about 3.5 years, and we work together as a team. We work in a wider team as well, but I know his qualities. I can see what his qualities are. Like, Tarek's a very, very good communicator. He's very reliable. You know, he gets on and he's on board and he does stuff and he just gets it done. And that, for me, as somebody who likes to get stuff done, that is so valuable. That's so valuable.
Excellent.
So it's about knowing who's around you and how you can play to each other's strengths as well, like the Incredibles. You know, how, you know, mum who stretches all over the place. I've watched the Incredibles too, don't worry. And, you know, other qualities that you can all kind of pick up from each other. And that is the beauty of working with other people, is that you can pick up those strengths. But yeah, this is just something to think about and uncover for yourselves, like in Johari's window. Uncover what your qualities are, find that as a base.
I probably would say, just to add to that, is that, you know, sometimes it's hard to figure out where we actually display certain skills, abilities, and qualities. And, you know, when you think about your time at school, if you think about when you do things such as Crest Awards, Duke of Edinburgh, if you represent one of the sport teams, think about the kind of skills and qualities that you're using in all of those instances. So say, for example, you play for the football team, fantastic an example of where you might use communication skills, leadership skills, relationship building skills. So there's loads of examples that you might not even necessarily be aware of at school where you join upon all of those qualities and skills.
Yeah, and I think sometimes many students can make the mistake almost of underestimating how valuable some of the experience they already have actually is. So that's a very, very helpful input there.
Absolutely. So just we had a few responses. We've had someone who just said that she's kind of just echoed the point that I just made before about leadership skills, as I was the sports captain. We've had someone else who has said she's disciplined, open-minded. Again, someone else has said enthusiasm, brilliant skill, creativity, problem solving, people skills, leadership skills, and empathetic.
Excellent stuff. Excellent stuff. That is great. And again, you know, with, as you can see, this list of qualities, skills, and abilities, there might be some things you've seen here. And if you was to be honest, you're like, actually, I could do with developing that as a skill. I can do with growing in that area. You know, we had a really interesting conversation about, you know, obviously when we look at our strengths, there's a natural conversation that comes up about our weaknesses. And I guess trying to balance them out, so to speak, is a helpful way to approach it. I think definitely with your strengths, lean into them, maximize them. That's what today's about. But actually, this is a good time to look at these qualities, skills, and abilities and think, actually, is that an area where I could pick up on? I think that's a key thing to think about. You know, again, guys, I'm not sure if you've got any input on that before we move on, but in regards to how we collaborate with some of our areas of development and weaknesses also.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't be good at everything. As much as you can try, you can't be good at everything. And it is important to recognize your strengths, but also I think acknowledging what your weakness is actually really important. So for me, like, I'm not the most natural presenter. I'm not. I'm much better in a one-to-one conversation than I am presenting to a large crowd of people. But I do it because I actually enjoy working with young people. I am also quite an empathetic individual. I can understand another person's perspective and maybe the things that they are going through at that time. And I discovered that through doing things like volunteering, for example. I volunteered for a good few years before having my children, actually. And then, you know, life happened and I couldn't do it any longer. But I really valued that because that experience led me to understand what the things that I'm good at. So don't negate the things that just you do in life. So one example again for me was I was one of the kids that got left behind who didn't manage to do work experience in sixth form. They couldn't find a placement for me. But what I ended up doing was organising the sixth form prom with two other students. And again, I found that I was the one who was spearheading things. I was the one who was making sure things got done on time. I was the one who was like, okay, do you mind going off and doing this so that I can go and do that, and working with them to make sure things happened. And that was really valuable for me. And the head of six, who actually tasked us with that, was really grateful that we just got on with it. You know, we just get on with it. And that's one of my things, is just you just get on with it. But I discovered that then sometimes we just get on with stuff and we don't even realize how good we are at doing that. Not that I'm blowing my own trumpet here, but yeah, that is one of my qualities.
And I think there's a great point there, that actually sometimes we discover our strengths in like challenging situations where we've got to respond to something. And then as you pointed out, by facing it head on, you might just find that as you do so, you start to realize things that you might not have realized had you have not approached that particular situation. So that's really helpful stuff, you know. Sophia, some coaching questions, over to you.
Yeah, so these coaching questions and all the questions today have actually been produced by James. He is the expert. This is what he does for a living, but I'm obviously assisting him today with all of this. So the first question I'd like to pose, and these are things that you can be thinking about over the summer, are what are the strengths that you have identified? And a lot of you have already identified a lot of your strengths, and I'm so pleased about that because it shows that you've already started your journey, and that's wonderful to hear. But those of you who you're not quite sure, or you need that validation sometimes, like, am I actually good at that? Like, am I actually as good as I think I am? Or maybe, gosh, there's other people who are better at this than I am. Those doubts can creep into your mind, but it doesn't mean you're not equally strong. So that's the other thing to say. But go and speak to people that you trust, that you value their opinion, and to help you identify your strengths. But the key thing is also go and get some experiences. There's one thing that I always say is just go and try things, be brave, step up, try things, because you'll never know how good you are until you've tried something. And it can be simple things. It can be just, volunteering. After this session, you might want to say, just Google NCS, right? So that's something that's a government initiative, and that is all about volunteering. And there's a variety of different things, and see what piques your interest. There's a reason why you're interested in certain things over others. It's because it works with your motivations and it works with your strengths that you may have not actually pinpointed yet. So go and get an experience. It can be anything. It can just be babysitting. It can be talking to an elderly neighbor, just going out there and making a connection. You can gain something from that. So, and the other thing is to bear in mind is that a lot of young people, I'm not going to say fall into the trap, I didn't really want to use those terms, but they can be very good at something, but it's not necessarily what they enjoy and what they're really motivated by. So I was speaking to someone the other day who was like, I did a history degree, but does absolutely nothing to do with history, and he just did it because he's like, well, I'm good at it. I'm not really sure if I enjoy it, but I know I'm good at it, and I know I'm getting the good grades in it. And now he does something completely unrelated, and there's probably a reason for that, because he wasn't actually thinking carefully about, where do I want to go in the future? So use those opportunities now to identify your strengths now while it's early, so that you can make the appropriate choices for you, not for anyone else, for you. So Tarek, is there any response to what are the strengths that you've identified, if there's any further comments?
Yeah, we've had a few people who have fed back. We've got someone who said that I've identified that I'm optimistic and determined. Someone said that I'm well-mannered, great at maths, creative and enthusiastic. Someone said that they're able to persist with difficult tasks at school, hence I can show determination. And someone said that they're open-minded and very curious and happy to know new things.
I love all those responses. They're really well considered. So really well done on those. I really like the maths and creativity. I'm like, oh, a future architect, maybe? Who knows? That would be a good combo. But just to put that out there, if that's something you're interested in. So the next question I'm going to pose to you is, what weaknesses have you discovered that you can work on? So we can all work on our weaknesses. We all have our weaknesses. I think the first step is actually to acknowledge that they are a weakness, and that's hard to do. I find that really hard to do, just to acknowledge that I'm not good at something is really difficult. But don't take yourself down the route of, okay, well, I'm not good at this, I'm just not going to bother, because that's when you failed. It's about understanding what you're not good at and actually saying, okay, well, what can I do to make things better? What can I do to improve myself? Where can I increase my skill base in that area? And sometimes you just need to have an honest conversation with somebody who you trust. He's going to give you that information, like, actually, you could be better at doing X, for example. And I always find those conversations really valuable, because they don't have to tell me that. They could just easily just ignore it and just say, oh, well, she's not going to change. I'm not going to bother telling her. But actually, I really value it when people say, actually, Sophia, you need to pick up your game here, because actually they've made the effort to do that. And that's a difficult conversation to have with somebody sometimes. But do listen when people say those things to you.
Totally. Yeah, and just to add to that, when we acknowledge or recognize where our weaknesses are, it's really helpful to know that actually once you've made that realization, it's very normal to feel a little bit disgruntled about it, but that's a part of the process. So first you recognize, oh, I'm not quite like the best at that, am I? And then that can almost, as Sophia said, like don't let that get you to the pit of despair. Just knowing that sort of disgruntled feeling, that's part of the process. You realize, actually I could grow in this area, and then over some time, what we say, like, just give yourself a bit of time, give yourself some grace, and then just to work on it, and then you'll find that actually you'll be able to look back in some time and say, you know what, I've come some way in that area actually. So that whole feeling of feeling disgruntled, for some people they're like, I'm disgruntled, so I'm not going to bother. But that whole disgruntled sort of moment is a part of the process. So embrace that as well, and then just continue to grow. Yeah.
Some really valuable advice, and I think you can get caught up on that, but the point is to keep moving. So those of you who have told us here you're determined, let's see that. I'm hoping you've sent in a few responses to that question and have stepped up and been brave and have acknowledged what are your weaknesses and how do you move forward from that. So Tarek, are there any responses in the chat box?
Yeah, some fantastic self-analysis going on here in the Q&A box. We've got someone who said, I think I should work on my open-mindedness because I believe that I look at things quite narrow-minded and just have my eye on one thing at a time, which is a great kind of self-analysis that's taken place there. Someone has said that they get stressed very easily when they have multiple work deadlines to meet. Someone said that they need to work and build on their communication skills. Someone said that they need to work on their lack of motivation for things that they find boring, and also their speed of writing and meeting deadlines.
I just got to say, I'm so impressed by the honesty, the bravery, and just how well you kind of really reflected on these answers, guys. It's really inspiring to hear. So definitely keep it up. Definitely keep it up. Yeah.
Absolutely. I concur with James on that. Well done for stepping up and being honest with yourselves. That's the most important thing, not with us. You're accountable to yourselves first and foremost. Okay. So well done, guys. So my third question, I'm going to actually skip over the third because I'm going to come back to that in a minute. But the question I'd like to pose to everyone is, how can you help others to discover their strengths? Okay. So this is something that I want you to think about. So I shared earlier like what I think Tarek's strengths are, because I think it's actually quite valuable to hear from somebody else, like, and validate what you think you're good at as well. That actually, yeah, you are good at that. I'm completely acknowledging that. And that's part, again, going back to Johari's window, is like what you think you're good at and what you're actually good at and what other people perceive you as good at. But also you may be a little surprised that someone might throw you a curveball. It's like, I never considered myself in that way. Exactly. So what can you do? What can you do to help others discover their strengths? Because I think that's really powerful, and I think that's a good thing to do just as a human being, to help others and to help them figure out their paths as well. Definitely. So Tarek, is there anything in the Q&A box, or is there anything that you'd like to add?
I've had someone who just said that the way that they can help people discover their strengths is by talking to them and by letting them know. And someone else has said they should speak to their teachers and find out what they think their strengths are.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So those are two really great ways to actually help others and get some feedback from your teachers, which we talked about as well. So I'm glad like the messages are hitting home here, and you're seeing how you can figure things out. And James is giving you the tools, like how do you go about it? How do you go and figure out where your strengths are? So that's really excellent. So I'm going to go back to research 3 careers that would fit with your strengths, because you do need to start off with your strengths. But the things that we've talked about are, you know, going out and doing some volunteering, but these are things that, and speaking to other people, but these are things that you need to develop over time. So you may not have a very clear idea of a career that you want to go into, or you may have a very clear idea, but what I'd like you to do is to kind of ask yourself really deeply, why do you want to go into that career? What are your motivations? And I'll give you one good tip why that's important. So one thing to bear in mind is that if you do go on to university, you'll be asked to write a personal statement, okay? And in that personal statement, you will have to explain why do you want to go and do this course? And a lot of universities are looking for authenticity. They're looking to see that you're actually going to stick to it and you're going to do the best you can in it. And if you have the right motivations to go into that course or into that field in the first place, that's a great place to start. So linking it back to something practical there, thinking ahead, like I've asked students in the past, why do you want to do this course? And they're stumped. And I'm always shocked by it, because it's like, you're about to apply for this course. Why do you not know why you're going to do it? Why can you not explain to me why you can't do it? And I know that sounds really harsh, but actually I'm doing it because I want them to think about it carefully, why they're going into that commitment at the end of the day.
Definitely, particularly as this 3 years, you know.
Absolutely, if not more after that. You know, when you actually get into the workplace, the degree is the start, the experience is the start. It's beyond that, like where all the other things you have to do. Like there's a very good quote, like, you don't want to get to the top of the ladder and find that you're leaning against the wrong wall. So make sure you're leaning against the right wall in the first place before you start climbing the ladder.
Yeah, totally. It's good stuff. Should we move on?
Yes, please.
All right, so that brings us to the end of our webinar. And what you should know by now is this: using your strengths can make your future career more enjoyable. I've got the 70-30 principle in mind when I say that. Using your strengths can strengthen teams. I've got the Incredibles in mind when I think about that. Friends and family can help you discover your strengths. So that goes back to the Johari Window. And putting yourself in new environments can help you discover your strengths. Again, just want to say well done for your participation. I think it's been really refreshing to see how engaged you've been, and all the absolute best as you go on to discover your strengths. Over to you, Sophia and Tarek.
Now's the opportunity to just ask any final questions. If you do have any, please pop them into the Q&A box and Tarek will read those out. So Tarek, do we have any final questions?
Someone actually, sorry, just a question that's come through now. Can you give any advice on where people can get work experience?
Yeah. So I mentioned the NCS earlier. Okay, that's a good one. There are sometimes some limitations in terms of what you can do because of your age, depending what age you are. I'm sorry, I don't know what age you are, but NCS is a good one. It does. I've been involved in NCS in the past myself, not as a participant, but as a deliverer in another charitable organisation that I was volunteering for, and it is very valuable. So have a look at that. But it can just be simple things, like I say, like things in school that you can be doing. Duke of Edinburgh, you know, stepping up when, even if there's like a new person in the class and they need to be shown around, that can make a huge amount of difference to a person. And it shows that you've got initiative and you're willing to take part in school life. And with life and school, you only get out as much as you put in. So look out for those opportunities, I would say. And when you're a bit older, there is doit.org, which is another website that is really great, and it's another government website. But look out for every opportunity that you can, because there will be lots of things that you can do in school, like mentoring, for example, mentoring someone younger, if that's something that your school does. School will be the main conduit of your volunteering, but even thinking about maybe doing something in a charity shop, speaking to people, you know, sorting out all the stuff in the back when people make donations. There's lots and lots of different opportunities, but you do need to go out and find those opportunities sometimes if they're not in school.
Great. We've got just one, if we've got time for one more question. Question for James. How did you find out what you wanted to do?
Oh, that's an amazing question. How did I find out what I wanted to do? So as I mentioned before, I had the privilege of being a youth worker in a youth club close to where I grew up. And growing up, I just noticed that I was quite passionate about my community, and I was quite passionate about the young people in my community and some of the challenges that were taking place in my area. And I guess at a fairly young age, I was interested in trying to help. So I think that's what definitely started, and then started my journey as to me finding out what I wanted to do. And then as Sophia was saying, there became opportunities for me to get trained. So I remember I took a youth coaching course, and there was an organization in my area that trained us in conflict resolution. So we would go into schools. So I was just really open, and I just had this passion for helping young people particularly. And I really enjoyed it as I did it. And then I saw that there was job opportunities around that. So I would say it was following, like, identifying what my passion really helped, trying to get experience really helped, and learning specifically, you know, what I enjoyed about a particular role helped quite significantly. And then a few years down the line, thankfully, I run a company where I still get to do all of these things, but the seeds of it started when I was about 15, 16, and I'm in my 30s now. So yeah.
Okay, that's really great. Thank you for that, James. I think we'll leave it there because we're slightly over time, but I think that's no problem if people are getting really good answers to the questions that they have. So I'd like to say really big thank you to everybody who's listened today. I hope you found it insightful. We found it insightful just hearing from you, to be honest, and all your responses, and that you're really thinking about your strengths. And I wish you to continue with that and think about how you can take that into the future. I'd like to also say a very big thank you to James, as always. Amazing.
Thanks for having me.
And also to Tarek, who's been there in the background, working away, responding to your questions.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to leave it there for today. I wish you all the best over the summer, and all the very best with your futures. We do have a website, so it's uel.ac.uk/schools and colleges. If you want to keep your eye on that, we will have actually all of our webinars up as podcasts, probably from September onwards. So if you want to catch any of the others, please feel free to log on to the website come September, October time, and we'll have those resources up for you. Okay, but I wish you all the best. Thank you again to everybody, and have a good day.